around to find out if we think as therapists, love is really blind. Welcome back to the Reflection Room. We are really looking forward to today's chat. If you guys have been following us for a while, you know that we have done a few episodes where we have just looked at clips from modern day shows or trending topics and given our perspective as clinical counselors. And today we are going to do the same with a show that was trending not too long ago. So we are really looking forward to talking about that. And that show is Love is Blind. How are you guys?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, doing really good. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. How are you guys feeling about it?
Good.
I'm
Season
very
8.
excited.
Yeah. Season 8 was a whirlwind for sure.
It really was. It really was. And I'm so glad that I was like, you guys have got to watch this show.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining me on this conversation. So I've seen bits and pieces of previous seasons. So this is the first season that I saw from beginning to end. And I think I just like the pod stuff. You know, typically I'm like drawn to the pod times.
Yeah.
And then afterwards I'm like, that's where all the drama and stuff comes into play. But it was really nice to follow these people from beginning to end. And so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about today. Any thoughts up front just about the show in general and any mental health aspects related to that before we get started?
Yeah, I also hadn't watched anything. I've never watched any other season until you guys were like, watch season 8. And I was like, okay. But it was really interesting because I'm not usually one who loves reality TV, like some reality TV, but not like the drama aspect. So I did really find myself drawn to the pods as well. I found it like very psychologically, like very interesting as a psychologist. So yeah, I love that part. And I think like the literal title, Love is Blind, like not being able to see each other added just like a really interesting layer that you don't see in like other shows nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I hadn't seen any seasons before this, and I haven't really seen a lot of reality TV, but I did see something like a meme or something afterwards, after the season came out, and it was talking about what if instead of women, they put in licensed therapists. And
Interesting.
Wait, that would be so cool.
I know. And then see like how they can figure out these guys' problems before they start.
Typically the guys.
That is an interesting take. Can you imagine what that would look like?
I feel like it would literally be exactly how the show ran. Like the wall somehow broke down their walls and they were vulnerable, so it might help.
It might. You're right, Amanda. Like, so I hadn't done virtual sessions with clients at all until COVID hit. And I remember the first few sessions that I had, I was like, this is not gonna work. Like, there's no way that I can do therapy like this over a screen. But I will say that I have grown to love it. I've grown to prefer it. And the clients that I work with, I mean, they come to me knowing ahead of time that I just do virtual counseling, and they really prefer it too. And I've noticed that what you just said is that I feel like there's something about the screen, whatever it is, I don't know, that just makes people feel a little less like on the spot versus like sometimes I think the expectation is like you go into counseling and you have the stranger looking at you, and yeah, there might be some truth to that, but eventually you kind of get over that. But I think there's something, especially for anxiously prone clients, that they love the opportunity to just like, yeah, it helps them kind of bring their walls down a little bit quicker than maybe they might in a typical counseling process, like in person. So it's funny you mentioned that, Amanda. I agree. There's something about that wall, I think.
Yeah, I've noticed that too in my virtual as opposed to in person, very short time, but I've been, I'm a graduate student therapist, so seeing clients over this period of time. And it's really interesting to see like the difference between in person and virtual. And I will say like in person has pros, as well, but virtual, I've noticed like there is that like there's more comfortableness, I guess, is the best way to put it. You put it more beautifully. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. So, and I don't know, have you noticed that, Hannah?
Yeah, I actually started out opposite of you because I started in 2020. So it was only telehealth, and I had never seen a client in person. And so coming towards the end of my grad school, I was about to graduate, and I started working for you, and I was like, I've never seen someone in person. So I started freaking out, like,
The
what is that
realization.
going to be like? Yeah. And it was scary, but the very last day of my internship, I was able to see someone in person, and it just kind of like made me feel a little bit better. But I do see how like screens are a little bit more protective, I feel like.
Yes,
And you can do it from
yes,
your
you're
own
right.
home. Like there's a lot of layers to it that I feel like, you don't have to drive. Commuting is annoying.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's very convenient, very, very convenient. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and
especially
again,
something as deep as therapy. Like I feel like
mhm,
being able to finish it like at home and then like, process what you went through with your therapist at home, I feel like could be
mhm.
beneficial too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So, all right, you guys ready to dive into it? So,
Yes,
I think we
super
have
ready.
4 clips, so
Okay.
we'll take one at a time. And I think it'd be interesting to hear what you guys have to think at the end. If you believe love is blind.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Let's get started.
Do you know the different attachment styles?
I do.
Do you know which one you are?
I am an avoidant.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, Madison. Let's talk about it.
Yes.
So, avoidant.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's my natural inclination, right? Is to
Yep.
be an avoidant. When I feel someone's energy start changing towards me, I get scared and I kind of run. It's in a sense of like, well, I don't need them anyway. And I don't know if that's like out of a healthy place or not, but there's just like certain things where I'm just like, that's not my problem.
Okay. I love
Cool.
attachment stuff. I could go
Me
on forever
too.
about
When I was
yeah.
watching it, I was like, I just hope we get to talk about this part.
I agree. What do you guys
Yeah.
think about the fact that they even knew about attachment styles? What are your guys' thoughts on that? The fact that this seems to be a little bit more of a common idea that's a bit more common in today's like society, especially on social media and stuff. You see so many things about attachment styles. So what do you guys think about that they even knew the terms and stuff?
I love that. I feel like I
Mhm.
have a lot of clients that still don't know. Like, I'll bring it up and they're like, oh, I haven't heard of that. But I do notice, like, across social media and maybe like Gen Z, millennial ages are, understanding it more. And I think it's fascinating because it's been a theory for such a long time. It's not new. It's been around since like, I don't know, the 60s. So, yeah, I love that it's getting more well known.
Yeah, me
Mhm.
too. Me too. I didn't know about it prior to going into, the psychology field and stuff, so it definitely came about. But I do think like with social media and psychoeducation being like a little bit more out there, I think that that's probably why they know. But I think it's like incredibly self-aware for people to know that attachment styles and stuff. But I have had some clients where they didn't know. So that's interesting that you bring that up too, because it's out there. But I wonder slightly if they had to do some kind of training before they went into this pod experience. I don't know. That's my mind. I'm like,
Huh.
did they get trained in
Yeah.
this? Like, how do they know that? Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
therapy. Maybe they were
Yeah.
in
Or
therapy.
therapy.
Maybe. Like right before they amp them up with.
Yeah, yeah, that would be nice to think that they've gone to therapy, right? And
Right.
if that's, let's say that's the case hypothetically, it just shows how practical a lot of these tools are that we go over or we kind of like instill or talk about in counseling practices, and it shows you how practical it is in real life and how beneficial counseling can be. When I do couples work, sometimes I'll say this to couples. I'll say that. 100% of whatever it is that you guys might be struggling with or dealing with within this committed relationship or marriage or dating experience, one or the other or both have actually brought that into the relationship. And I say 100% because oftentimes when you think about whatever the issue is between the two people that are involved in the relationship, there usually are threads that are related to like either past experiences, past relationships, trauma, childhood experiences with like parenting and upbringing. And so I naturally then kind of go into this idea of attachment style, which is essentially that, right? Which is this idea that we show up in our current romantic relationships or just relationships in general as an adult. And the way that we show up is oftentimes a reflection of some of the experiences that we had growing up as children. And so what do you guys think about, I think her name's Madison, right? When she said avoided, what do you think he was thinking? What do you think she was thinking? And what does that even mean?
Like what you just said, like I do think of attachment styles as almost like a blueprint for how you connect with others that you learn when you grow up. And I feel like avoidant gets a bad rap. Like there's secure, anxious, avoidant, disorganized. And avoidant, like just in the name itself, like I feel like there's a negative connotation to it. But I feel like it really stems from like a childhood that was like met with not the consistency that it needed in terms of emotional like support and even potentially like some abuse and stuff like that. I feel like, you know, I don't know, like I'm kind of on the fence about it. Like I just feel like it gets a bad rap, but he did definitely respond like, "Oh, Madison, let's talk about it," because he might know that she's, avoidant and might not want to talk about it, but I feel like the fact that she just knows in general and beyond that the little clip that we just watched, like she was so willing to like talk about it and like become self-aware and like grow from it. And I feel like that was like really cool watching throughout the season.
Yeah, I actually recently did a training on attachment styles with EMDR. So, like,
Nice.
integrating the two, and it was fascinating. And the way they explained it, they boiled it down to like the very basics. But anxious attachment style, they tend to feel like they need to earn people's love. So they do whatever they can to like make them love me. Like, I'll do this for you. I'll love you this hard, like chasing them almost. Avoidant tends to believe that everyone will hurt or leave them, so they're just going to act as if they already did. So they pull away when they feel like somebody else is starting to pull away. They'll just automatically like, oh, they're gonna leave me anyway. So I see where she said that, and she already knows that that's her natural inclination, so it sounds like she's willing to work on it and knowing it's half the battle. Like a lot of people just walk around their whole lives not knowing they do this kind of stuff, so being self-aware is half of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And I'm thinking, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think she runs into some conflict with some of the guys, right? And I don't think she really ends up with anyone in
Between
the end.
Alex Mason, I think it was. She was between both of them, and what really came to the head with her and Alex was this difference in attachment style. And ultimately, Alex like just didn't feel like he could like fully be connected to her and trust her because avoidants do kind of struggle with intimacy and stuff like that. But in my personal opinion, watching it as a therapist and a person, like I do think that she was like willing to work on it and he kind of like cut her off pretty fast in my opinion. But yeah, avoidant attachment style and anxious is a common pairing in couples and very pursuer withdraw as we've all learned before. So yeah, it would have been interesting to see if it did go somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I love how you said too earlier, Amanda, you said like avoidance. It just carries like a negative connotation, just the word. And so and I know you and I share that whole narrative thing, so it makes sense that you would focus on that. I wholeheartedly agree that because that word just avoidant carries such a negative connotation, I think that sometimes avoidance kind of get a bad rap. But if you look at it this way, it's essentially their way of protecting themselves. It's similar to what you just said, Hannah. It's like everyone in my life has left and abandoned me, so I'm just going to live my life as if that's going to be the case moving forward. And then you show up that way in all of your future relationships, unless it's addressed. But yeah, I think when we look at it as like, oh, someone who just wants to avoid and not attach, and they just can be independent and live their life their way, it carries a negative connotation. But when you look under the hood there, it's like what's driving that is just this desire to not be hurt ever again and to protect themselves. So I'm curious, I don't know how you guys feel about how he responded to that, but any suggestions or feedback on how people should respond to someone who is in a relationship with someone who is showing avoidant tendencies? We'll just put it that way.
That's a good one. Actually, I have clients who are in like an anxious and avoidant relationship. So like they're the anxious and they're dating an avoidant. And this is a common struggle, like getting them to communicate and understand where they're coming from. And it's hard for me not to go into therapist mode with that. Like if I imagine myself in that position, I'm like, well, tell me about your childhood. I mean, like,
What happened to you?
Yeah, what?
What happened?
I think that would be really hard for me to take off the therapist hat and be girlfriend or partner or whatever. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, the question again was about how anxious and avoidant, like how we would tell someone how to respond to that, basically. A client or something.
Yeah, or even like what Hannah was saying too, if you find yourself in that situation, any feedback on what to do? Just curious.
Totally. Back to like your question about his response. I didn't like love it. I think there was some hesitation. Like I said, like there was some negative connotation that he derived from that. But he did mention in the show that like he had a previous experience in a relationship with an avoidant and that went bad. So he's just kind of like, making sure that it was going right for him and stuff. But I think advice would be like, just like what you said, Natalie, like there's something underneath that. And like it might seem like they don't care, they're independent, but truly like it is from a place of like just deep pain and like probably the most important people in their life hurting them. And it's not like against the anxious attachment or anything like that. It's something they've learned. But what's beautiful about attachment styles is that they can evolve, they're not fixed. So like say they had gotten to a relationship, like she could have learned like a healthy attachment and they could have like worked through that and stuff. So yeah, many thoughts, but just approach it with like genuine empathy and open-mindedness because people can change. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a great. I love that quote. People can change. Yeah, and you're right about that, especially with the attachment style. That is the goal is to kind of move more towards the center where the secure attachment kind of lies. Yeah, I think I would, with Alex specifically, I do applaud him for recognizing that was I've had more and I would just want to do things differently moving forward. And so I think that's a key is like learning from past experiences and trying to do things differently. I cringed a little bit.
Yeah, that's the part that like,
yeah,
I do applaud him in the sense of like understanding it and understanding how it works for him and his relationship and having that conversation. But the initial response was like a little like, you could tell it hurt Madison a little. Yeah.
Yeah, you have an avoidance that's actually being vulnerable. Like,
you're like, ooh, like she could have just never told you.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah, that initial response. But yeah, he definitely like he tried to understand where she was coming from and she described her childhood and why that was and like, why she's kind of like learning about this attachment style and moving past that. But ultimately there was just something that just wasn't going to work for them. Yeah.
Oh, I can go on and on about attachment styles. I learned about it. It encompasses past, present, and future. So I think it's a really cool thing to kind of like read up on and stuff. So, all right, you guys ready for clip number 2? Yeah. All right.
Then my like OCD stuff happened was
it involuntary or you were like hyper aware?
You're like aware of it. You know it's weird, but you still have this like urge to do it.
So you just let your mind kind of just like spin.
That's basically the best way of putting it would
like
be spinning.
overthinking it and spinning on it.
Oh, that was a good one, actually. That's a good clip. I forgot about that.
Me too.
I remember the show watching it and I was like, oh my gosh, as a therapist, I was like, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. What stood out for you? Because I remember now watching that, and as a therapist, there was something that bothered me about that clip. So I'm just, before I share, I'm just, or that part, but I'm just curious what you guys like. Yeah. What was it that stood out for you guys?
Gosh, there's so many little tidbits in that short little clip. It can go different ways. Yeah.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, he had been to therapy quite a bit, and he talked about that. Yeah. I feel like this debunks like OCD because people are like, oh, I'm so OCD because I like things neat and clean, but that's not the true definition. The counting, the obsessive like compulsions that you have to do, stressors like making it worse as well. I like, not that he experiences that, but he was open to sharing like what real OCD was like for him.
I agree. Yeah. And he said he knew that it was weird or odd, but he highlighted the fact that it was like very, like he was very well aware of like what he was doing, what was happening, the feelings that he was getting. And so to think that someone is under such pressure like that all the time and to be aware of that pressure and constantly wanting to like essentially scratch the itch, and just kind of have that just cease and do away with. But to live your life like that, I can only imagine what that must be like on a day-to-day basis, depending on what the obsession and the compulsion is. But I thought that was so interesting how he said like, oh no, I knew it was happening and I was aware of it. And I'm like, gosh, that must be a challenging experience for those that are enduring something like that.
Yeah, I have a couple clients who do speak on that awareness, which is really interesting because it can feel so out of their control, but yet they know it's happening and they know it's like quote unquote weird. I'm sure there's a better word for it, but it's not necessarily something that they like want to do. And it's kind of happening to them. I think of this analogy like they might not be driving the car, but they're like in the passenger seat or they're in the in the back or something. And like the obsessions and compulsions are happening to them. And it can be a really, really big struggle for some people.
I agree. Yeah. So this is what I'm wondering. Gosh, and I forgot her name. What's her name?
Oh my gosh. I know it. I know it. Monica. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
I was like,
Monica.
I did
Okay.
love them together. It was a bummer when they didn't
I
get
thought,
married.
no, this was a couple I thought they would. And I thought what was so interesting was seeing a different facet of her at the end. Like in the whole time I find her to be silly and lighthearted and like,
Carefree and
yeah. And then you just see the realness and the rawness of what relationships can bring out of people. And you see that she does have the ability to go deep and to feel, and it just wasn't, they just didn't get there. But yeah, I was like, I was rooting for them. There was something about the way that she was responding to him when he was sharing that, again, like I'm just, as an outsider, so as an observer looking at like the show, and it could be so many things related to that. Like I understand there's like production around them and there's cameras. And so that would impact the way that somebody's engaging in a conversation that's serious, right? But it was almost like she was like, okay, yeah, I know. Like very like almost minimizing it and just kind of pushing it aside. Not to say that that was her intention, but it was almost like, here's this person that's disclosing something that is heavy for some to talk about their mental health struggles.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I just want her to respond a little bit better. And so I was just curious if you guys felt that way when she was talking.
I did.
Yeah, I guess a little bit now that you say it, like in the back of my head. Like, I think that derives a little bit from her childhood experience. Because, I mean, she was coming from the family with like a shared sock bin. And like, I feel like a little bit of that plays into it because she might have just been like, I remember an argument they had when they lived in the apartments together was like the difference between him being so neat and her being a little bit more messy or, like all over the place. And it might have come from a place of her just like genuinely not really getting it, or because of the stigma with OCD, it's just like, oh, you just want to keep things neat. It's different than that. That's not exactly like Hannah said, like that's not the accurate definition of it. So maybe that's where it's coming from. They also were drinking, and I'm sure the production would add some elements, but I did feel a little bit of that too. Yeah.
I also think a lot of people don't know how to respond. And I think we're also very heightened in how to respond when people are sharing something very intimate and vulnerable. So like I know a lot of people, even friends, are like, I don't know when somebody's crying, like what do I do? And I'm like, just be with them. Like you don't have to say anything. You don't have to say a word. Just sit with them. And I think a lot of people have to be trained to react in a certain way. Like it's a learned experience how to respond to people in that way. And that silly surface level, personality was what came out when it should have been that deep side of her that didn't come out till the end, like Natalie was saying. And I think even she tried to make it humorous at the end, like they were laughing about it. And I was like, ooh, there's a time and a place for humor. And I know like I laugh a whole lot during my workday, but that's not quite appropriate, I don't think, in that sense.
Yeah. Especially with the nature of him disclosing like why, because I think there had been something with his sister in the hospital, and I can't remember exactly what her condition was, but it was pretty serious from what I gathered. And she could have like been there for him a little bit more in that sense of like that must have been a really hard time or something like that, a little bit more empathy. And maybe that would have made their connection a bit stronger. I don't know. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, that was my thought. That was my thought too. And you're right, Hannah. Like sometimes people may not fully know how to respond, and maybe they didn't grow up in a household or were raised with caretakers that were like emotionally present or open or asking the right questions to get them to like feel the same way. So that probably is the case. I thought it was interesting how I felt that way in that moment when I saw that. I was like, oh, I feel like he just needs I wanted to hug him, after that whole
Aw.
thing where it turned into kind of like a laughing thing in the end. But then it's interesting to see what happened to their relationship. And in the end, neither one felt like they had created a strong enough connection to move
Mhm.
forward. And I think that what contributes to that is the lack of vulnerability or lack of intimacy between two people. And I think it's when there's like little moments like that we just saw where somebody doesn't really know maybe how to be present for their partner during a time when they're talking about something so vulnerable or sensitive. So it's interesting to see how then it ended up playing out, I think, ultimately in their relationship and separation.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of fun together, and I think that that's why they probably stayed together for as long as they did. But you're right, like they just didn't fully connect with each other on like a deeper level. Like it was always surface like fun, which is great. It's great to have in relationships. You want to have fun with the person you're with, but it does require a little bit of deeper work as well. Yeah. Yeah, that could have been an
Yeah.
opportunity for Monica to show that to him. And I think when their wedding day came about, which is still so strange to me, but when their wedding day
1
came
week, it's like,
about, I know it's insane. But like it seemed like he just wasn't fully connected, and maybe that might have been like some of that. Like he just wasn't fully in it. Like they still really liked each other and had fun with each other, but they weren't like emotionally connected.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's still hard to wrap my mind around
Yeah.
the time frame of this show. But I
Yeah,
agree with
I'll
you.
never get
I
it. It's
agree.
why it's so interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly. So popular. Yeah, so
Yeah, and
popular.
we walked
Okay.
away with one married couple, so I thought we were gonna
I
get zero,
know.
so that's good.
I know. I wonder if they're still
Taylor and
together.
Daniel, they
They
Yeah.
are,
are. I
they
had to
They
are.
look.
are?
I
Yeah.
follow them on
Ah,
Instagram. Yeah, they're so
wow.
cute. Yeah.
Wow, and it's been now over a year, I think, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Since the show was recorded. Interesting. Oh, okay, so maybe that is your answer to the question. It's love blind.
Also, I thought it was so interesting that they waited a year, then had a reunion, and that's how the structure of the show. I was like, that is very interesting. So they like keep everything under wraps for a
For a
whole
whole
year.
year. Yeah.
And then they were able to like post their wedding photos. I was like, oh my gosh. And then they
Yeah,
hashed it out in front of everyone. Like all the drama. I was like, oh my God. It's very
exactly. Yeah,
interesting.
it's like the pod experience, like
On steroids.
lasted over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. You're right about that. I didn't think about that. I'm sure that brings them closer together to not be able to share anything except with each other during that year.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Clip 3. You guys ready?
Yes.
I don't want to dismiss her.
Mm-hmm.
People evolve.
Mm-hmm.
People change. Like knowing you, I love your heart. Your heart is amazing. I'm gonna trust your word, but like I'm telling you now, if more comes out of this, if I find out like there's anything at all, I won't be able to trust you.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you now, like I need to know everything.
I need to
This
know
relationship
everything.
is, I was rooting for them so much. And then in the end, like, I was like, wow, I was even a little blindsided by him. But yeah, crazy.
I actually thought that they would make it.
Me too.
This was the one relationship that well, I guess in Monica and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other one, but this one actually, I felt like he was trying his best maybe to kind of make
Mhm.
compromises and meet her in the middle. And I don't know, I just thought that I was like, I think they're going to make it in the end. So I was shocked actually by what happened. But this I thought was interesting, this specific moment. And I think maybe a lot of people can probably relate to this, especially in today's day and age with social media. And I mean, everything is really just kind of like put out there for the world to see if they wanted to. And so to hear that something happened and she wasn't aware of it, and then to feel like you're in the dark, and then for her to say, I need to know everything. I'm even curious what you guys think about that. Is that something you would recommend a couple do? But yeah, so any initial thoughts?
I think he was looking at it now. When I was watching it earlier, I didn't really notice this, but he's very squirmy in that situation. Which now I'm like looking back at it, like
He kept scratching and
he was
yeah.
really uncomfortable. And yeah, I get that would be super uncomfortable because it came out of nowhere and he wasn't expecting it. But it makes me wonder if he was actually hiding something, and that was a red flag that she ignored. She didn't ignore it, but she let it slide.
That's true. That's a good point, Hannah. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah. No, I
Oh,
feel
right.
very similar in that. Like watching the last episode when they did the year reunion and they hashed it out in front of everyone, like I was talking about, like there were so many aspects that Sarah, I think that was her name, mentioning about like how he like ghosted her and they thought they were gonna like move in together and like all these different aspects that like I feel like during the show he was definitely showing his best side, whatever that might mean to him. But I feel like I don't know, personally me, I got kind of like Sarah, I got a little bit blindsided by it. Like I kind of let it slide too. I was like, oh no, like this girl's just blowing up his phone or blowing a story out of proportion. But later on you find out like most of those stories were true. And then you just feel a little bit bad for Sarah in that moment because it was like she was really like advocating for herself and she was a very strong feminist as well. And like, hey, are you being completely honest with me? Because I'm getting a vibe that like you're not, and like evidence is showing the opposite. Yeah, mixed feelings about it because what we learned later on. But in the moment, I wasn't so like, oh yeah, he's in the wrong. But now I'm like, maybe the other way. But yeah, I think she maybe subconsciously picked up on like maybe some not full truth about some things. And maybe that's why she was so strong about her opinion in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some really good feedback. I think there's a reason why they say, I think the phrase is like your gut is your second brain or something like that. I think there's something to be said for having a feeling that something's not quite right. Not to say that what you're feeling is factual or what really is occurring, but I think it's another thing to just kind of like lean into and explore, very similar to any other physiological feelings that we might experience. Or, sometimes we say when somebody experiences emotions, it's like it's because something's going on, something's shifting here. We just want to pay attention to what's happening. And so I think like listening to your gut is something very similar, not to say that what you're thinking is true, but it's like, let's just explore it and kind of like look into it a little bit closer. And you can see that in this clip here, she's trying to, and I totally overlooked his like being fidgety and stuff. So that's interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and look at it. But I think I remember her being very calm, like very calm, cool, collected. And I think that helped, prevent the conversation from really kind of exploding or really escalating further than it needed to. But I was really happy to see her, advocate for herself and say like something just doesn't seem right. And then she's asking him for the full truth and all the details. What do you guys think about that? Is that something that you would recommend or say to a client, whether individually or in a couple setting, that, let's put everything on the table. Let's be 100% transparent.
I feel like that's a tough one because you mean like relationships, right? Like previous relationships or just in general?
In general, yeah. So if there's like a conflict, like to say like, let's put everything out there and then we'll kind of go from there. Is that something you guys would encourage?
I don't know. That's a good one. I don't think I've come across that, and I don't work with couples, so it definitely hasn't come up in that way. But I don't know. What do you guys do?
Yeah, I don't work with couples either, but I've taken some like family and marriage classes. And gosh, it's interesting because, you want the full truth, obviously. I mean, like, at least I know I do. Like, that's my opinion personally. But sometimes the full truth can be hard to navigate. So, in that situation specifically, like, I feel like she felt very in the dark and it came out of nowhere and it was confusing. So it does make sense why she'd want like more information. He didn't really give much information during the show, which I think they were like at a coffee shop or something. They were talking about it. And the way that he was talking about it, like, he was just like, oh, it's just in the past. Like nothing happened. Just felt very like not enough information. So I do understand why she asked for more. She was definitely following her gut because there was something wrong in that sense. Yeah. But I don't know.
I agree. I'm kind of more like what you just said, Amanda. I think it's important to pay attention to what your partner's needs are. I think that there might be some people, just like everything else, it falls on a spectrum. And I think there might be some people that might say, I think that's enough information. It was in the past. I don't really want it to be a part of this current relationship. We don't have to discuss it anymore unless something comes up again. And then there are others that are just wired differently and just feel like in order for me to be fully trusting in this relationship, I want to see how you handle this. And I feel like I need to know as many details as possible to decide whether or not I can move forward with you. And it seems like she was asking for more information and he wasn't, for whatever reason, providing that for her. And so I think that's the key there is like, what is your partner asking for, requesting? Do you feel comfortable with that request? And then, if so, great. If not, then let's talk about like whether or not it's possible to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. I heard something recently I thought was really interesting, and I can't remember exactly. It was on a podcast, so I'll have to go back and look and see. But she was talking about the person being interviewed was talking about the difference between honesty and transparency. And I actually had never heard anybody talk about that in regards to relationships. And she was saying, I don't want honesty in a relationship. I want transparency in a relationship. And she said the difference is honesty is I have to ask you the question. So I have to ask you, what happened here? Who was that? Where did you go? Or, and it's like, and then the honesty part is you telling me the answers to my questions truthfully. She said, but I want transparency where I don't even have to ask the questions. I don't even have to think about the questions. You are just realizing that I want to be completely open with you. And so before you even ask me what you're needing, I'm going to provide you all that I have. And I think keeping that perspective can really avoid situations like this, where somebody feels cornered, somebody feels on the spot, and then people respond differently based off of, being kind of confronted. Sometimes they answer, sometimes they don't, sometimes they become aggressive, sometimes they're, a little bit more passive. And so I think if both people are willing to be transparent, then you don't find yourself in situations like this.
I love that. And the first example that comes to my head is like if somebody's ex partner reaches out to them and they decide not to tell their current partner and they find out about it later, that can be extremely hurtful. But instead, if they say like, oh, hey, by the way, so-and-so reached out to me today, but this is how I'm handling it. You don't have to justify your actions. You're just being transparent and saying, this is what happened. Here's how I'm handling it. And problem solved.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I got from Sarah, like in the pods and even outside of the pods, like she was a very like open person, very like she valued communication and talking about things. And I feel like that's just where he didn't like meet her there 100%. That's kind of where the disconnect was. And especially in regard to this situation that happened, like he definitely just provided as much information was like okay, surface level okay, but I feel like she didn't feel like she was getting that transparency at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are all great points. You're right. I forgot about that, about the other conversations in the pods. And that was a problem that she had was she felt like he just wasn't, providing either the answers or hadn't even given those things any thought. So you're
even
right from
in
the
regard
beginning.
to politics, that just reminded me, like she asked his like direct question and he was very vague in it. So then his responses, even in this situation, were very vague as well. So I think that that's where she just didn't like that he wasn't fully transparent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I talked about this with when we did Nobody Wants This, but I honestly didn't think Sarah and Ben were going to work out from the beginning.
Oh my gosh, you knew it. I did not. I was blindsided.
And it's because their values don't line up at all. And they were trying to find a middle ground, but they just could not do it. Like
he was trying,
yeah, she had these values, and she asked him what he thought, and he was like,
I'll work on it.
Yeah, and if you're somebody who's like super passionate about something, and you have somebody who over here who's lukewarm about it, like, there's going to be some problems.
You're right about that. Maybe you should work with couples.
You'd actually be a great couple therapist.
But then I might be like, oh, you guys
aren't going to work.
You need to split up. Your values don't match.
Yeah, that's funny. You're right. You're absolutely 100% right about that. There were too many differences on things that were too important. Yeah.
Yeah, like she even tried to go to church, but it wasn't really like her vibe. and that made him upset. And like for her values in terms of like the LGBTQ plus community and like just things going on in the world, like she was very opinionated and very strongly had values for that. And like I think she knew deep in her heart like she needed someone to match her in that sense, and I think he knew that he needed someone to match him in his values and his religion. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah, and that you're right. It was good then to, now that I'm thinking about this as we're chatting, it was good to see her, I guess, mainly just realize like this might work like temporarily or in the interim
You
long
might be
run.
attracted. Yeah.
There's too many differences. Yeah, too
Yeah.
many
You
differences.
might think he's cute, but
There can be differences. There can be lots of differences.
oh yeah.
But when
Oh
it
yeah.
comes to like those core values,
Important.
The strong
yeah.
ones. Remember on her wedding day, again, that's really weird. Her sister had been like, Sarah, don't do this for anyone but you, because I think she had some people pleasing tendencies in the past. And I think we did, even similar to Monica, we saw a different side of Sarah. Like she was able to be a little bit more deeper, but we saw a different side to her in the sense of like advocating for herself a bit more and setting boundaries and being like, actually, no, this is extremely important to me and I'm not willing to just like act like it isn't. Yeah, I thought that was really empowering. I was bummed. I thought they would make it, but I think ultimately it was the best decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Not sometimes the best decisions are the hardest
Yes. She was
decisions.
crying.
Yeah.
I felt so bad.
I know. I can't imagine having those aspects of my life like showcased on like national TV.
I
So
could
I
never.
give them kudos.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
never. Yeah. That
No.
takes some serious vulnerability. Yeah. And strength.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. The last one. You guys ready for
Cool.
the last
Yeah.
one? All right.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. I need to know too, you know?
Now I feel crazy.
No, please don't feel crazy. My feelings for you haven't changed. And like, I hope, believe me?
I do. But you didn't know. Like maybe you did follow me at some point.
Yeah.
But if you...
Yeah. There's like, I promise you. I promise you I didn't know. I promise. Whatever you need to do to like process, I'm okay with.
This scene, oh my God. Yeah.
I thought it was over at that point.
So did
I think they would get married. That's the one couple. I was like, oh my God.
Yes, I was like, there's no way. I think he's lying. He
I thought he
definitely
was
followed
lying.
her.
I did too.
He looked like he was lying, but I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know, slightly believe. I'm still like, I think you followed her, but okay.
Yeah, it was the body language for me. What did you guys? I just felt like, yeah.
Like
And
his communication, his like words match what the response should have been, but there were a lot of times where it was like there were weird coincidences. I even looked at her Instagram when it came up in the pods, like, or when he came up like the scene. I looked at her Instagram and it did have all those like identifying factors that she had mentioned, and I was like, and that's what they talked about in the pods. I thought that was very interesting, but maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know. I'm still, but they're married, so it's all good.
Bring up like that, like sometimes we can notice like that, like I guess dissonance or like disconnect between what a person's saying and then how they're like presenting. And I definitely felt like there was that disconnect. I was like, I hear what he's saying, but the way that he's responding to it is almost like, oh gosh, I hope I don't get, like, I hope the truth doesn't come out, or I hope I don't get caught. You know, you just kind of see that disconnect there. And so it was a little bit hard for me to overlook the nonverbal cues and then just kind of listen to what he had to say. But what do you guys think about like the way he communicated it, and then the way that she communicated during that moment? Do you feel like it was healthy? Do you feel like there were unhealthy aspects to it?
I was going to ask something similar because I don't know how I feel about going through each other's phone. And even though it wasn't his phone, it was her app that she had like people checking, or she could see who was looking at her Instagram. But I don't know. I just find it interesting though. It seems like he was acting on a defense in that situation. Yeah. Anyway, how did you guys handle that?
Yeah. She even mentioned, like, in that clip, she was like, and even if you did follow me and he didn't move, like, he didn't even flinch. And I thought that was very interesting because he didn't even, like, say, no, I didn't. Like, he was just like, I promise we'll get through this. Like, whatever you need. Like, do you trust me? And, like, I don't know. I felt a little weirded out by it personally. But, you know, maybe he did, and maybe it was an accident, or maybe he didn't. Who knows? But I do know that, like, when they do Love is Blind, it's in one town, like small town vibes, Indiana, or I think that's where it was. And so it could have potentially happened for sure. But in terms of like healthy or unhealthy, I don't know. I think she handled it in a good way. Like, hey, this is what's bothering me. And like communicated that pretty early on. She didn't really like not say anything or just kind of like, she didn't like not stand up for herself, is what I'm trying to say. Like, she definitely felt something weird in her gut and spoke on it. And I felt like that was healthy. In terms of like looking at the details on the phone and stuff, like, I don't know. I think that that chalks up to like this experience being like you are meeting someone for the first time randomly. And I feel like that added like that layer of like, you were just a stranger a couple days ago. So I feel like that's maybe why she did that. But in terms of him, I feel like it came off healthy, but I feel like there's like slight undertones that were unhealthy. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if what you're picking up on is like there was like an accusatory tone
Yes.
on her end, like she firmly believed that he had followed her and that he was being dishonest, versus like approaching the conversation from a place of like, I always say from a place of curiosity, but just like wondering, like, hey, I'm thinking this is what I saw, or I think this is what may have happened. Like, can you just kind of help fill in the missing pieces? And I think it was very like, oh, I'm sure that this happened, or I'm sure you followed me, or I remember seeing something, or there's no way that you knew that about me without looking at my Instagram and stuff. So I think that's what it was. I think that for me, I find that to be maybe the unhealthy piece of that. It's just like the tone that she kind of approached that conversation with. Although I agree that I think it was great that she felt something and then it was there and she didn't allow it to kind of like eat away at her or to just brush it under the rug, but she knew that it was something that needed to be discussed if they were going to be moving forward.
Yeah.
So I thought that was that was helpful. Interesting, Hannah, that you brought up the phone thing, like looking through the phones and stuff. Like, and I guess with the Instagram too, there should have been a level of privacy, and she felt like he kind of like overstepped that and looked at her social media when they weren't supposed to. And so you have privacy, you have trust that's coming up there, like those two things. And then the same would be for looking at a partner's phone or something. It's like you have those two concepts there. Is like, should we have privacy? And then what do people need in order to feel like they can trust their partners fully? So yeah, I think we've talked about this before, but what do you guys think about
Yeah, we did with Nobody Wants to.
yeah.
It comes back around. Yeah. I personally feel like once you've developed a sense of trust, like there shouldn't be that in a relationship. There should just kind of be like full trust in each other. But again, like I think the nature of what happened for her was like, you know, they just met and developed a strong relationship and just felt like, oh no, he saw my profile before we entered the pods. He knew everything. He knew what I looked like. And that's the whole premise of Love is Blind, is like not doing it based on look. So I think that that was like the core of like her fear. But yeah, I feel like looking through each other's phones is definitely more of a high school and younger aspect to relationships, at least from what I experienced. And I feel like when you evolve in a relationship and you grow that trust, it really isn't needed. Yeah. Personally.
Yeah. I feel like if you go into it with a thought of, if I give him my phone to like play music, and am I going to be concerned that he might see something? If you go into it with that mindset, like if he just is using my phone to like put in directions and somebody texts me, like, is that going to be a problem? And then if you go into it with that mindset, I feel like there shouldn't be any problem. Like, you shouldn't have to look at your partner's phone. You should just be able to trust them with, oh, put in this, directions to this place, or what's that song you were talking about, like add it to my playlist, and you can just like hand them your phone, and there's that level of trust, but there's no need to be searching through messages and pictures and nonsense.
And there's still that level of privacy, like you each have your own privacy, but there is just that open communication, that trust, that like I'm not concerned. I'm not gonna like freak out if you're looking at my phone because there's nothing that's gonna be like bad on there. Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys think about this. I agree with the things that you guys are saying. So I see relationships, especially like very like committed relationships or marital relationships, as kind of like a restorative process. And I think that we all, no matter how much we work on things, like all continue to have stuff that we need to okay, maybe not need to, but like we could work on in order to like continue to improve as a partner, as a parent, as an employee, as a person in general. And I believe that um, it could actually be an honor and a blessing to be able to be a part of that restorative process for your partner. And so I say all of that to say that if someone does have a partner that it's tough for them to trust and they are wanting to look through the phones or have passwords or I don't know, share social media accounts, whatever it is, there's this level of mistrust that's there, whether it's from that relationship that they're in or previous relationships, or we were talking about attachment style earlier, childhood experiences. And so you have the opportunity as a partner to like help your person kind of restore that aspect of them. So I think it's okay as long as there's open communication that if your partner is needing to see things or needing to look at things, like if you can providing that, but then also having conversations around like why or what do you think's happening or what do you expect to happen or what has happened in the past, and like being a part of that healing process for your partner. So I think if you see it that way, like I get to be a part of this healing journey for my partner, I actually think that it takes away the negative feelings, the resentment, the bitterness of like, God, there she goes again with like the mistrust, or like, you know, I like, there she goes again thinking I'm like talking to someone on social media. It just kind of changes the tone, I think, to those kinds of conversations. And I think it brings a whole lot more healing to a relationship and to a person when it's approached that way. So I think it's okay sometimes, just depending on the situation and the way that the partners see that like relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and especially like that's kind of what I was talking about, like in terms of growing and evolving in that trust in the relationship. Like it may take initially that healing aspect if a partner had struggled with like cheating in the past, or you know, those kinds of mistrust things that happening, like especially in regard to attachment styles, like I had mentioned, like as we know from our trainings, like we can evolve our attachment style. So say someone comes in with anxious or avoidant or disorganized, which is a whole nother ball game. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Yeah, like having those attachment styles, but then being in a relationship that, like say for avoidant, like someone does show up and does like that you can trust and is very consistent with their unconditional love and things like that can be healing. And that might take that initial step of healing to evolve your, you know, attachment style to something a little bit more secure and having more trust in people. And it might take that one person to really be like, let the walls down and be like, you know what, like you can look at everything about me because I know what people have done to you in the past, and that might be what they need to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah, that was good. All right, so what do you guys think? Do you guys think love is blind?
I don't know. I have a really
I
hard
feel
time.
like it's so simple. I feel like it's too simple. I feel like human beings are too complex. The statement
Yeah,
"love is blind." It's like, well, they got to talk about values, and they got to talk about this, and they got to. Yeah, I
I
feel like it
agree.
can be. I feel like it
Yeah.
can be. Yeah.
Appearance wise, I think the goal of the show
Yes.
is to be appearance wise, and I could get on
Yeah.
board with that. The
Me too.
timeline, though, I cannot get on board.
Yeah, they need more than 10 days in the pods. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I know they go on dates like every day, and it's like, you know, it's different than what a normal life experience would look like. But yeah, love is blind in terms of appearance. I agree. Like that is definitely true. But I feel like love in terms of connection and commitment and long-term relationship takes love is blind initially to get to that point to have those conversations. Yeah. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I
Yeah.
agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that I think it's obviously a little unnatural to be isolated like that, although it does eliminate distraction, so it probably speeds up their connection process maybe a little bit, but But yeah, when it says Love is Blind, I guess they're talking specifically about appearance. And I think if there's just one successful story out of this show, then I guess it proves that love can be blind. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely love is blind, like in terms of appearance. Yeah, because what ultimately should matter is the person and how they make you feel and how they treat you. Yeah, I believe
I
that
think
a lot.
a really great example of this is Selena Gomez and Benny Blanco.
I
Yes.
love them so much. Did you see the most recent, like him throwing the prom for her?
Yes, I'm
My
obsessed
mind
with
was
this man.
blown. It's like he, a child actor. So he like bought a limo and did a photo shoot and made a whole
Oh,
prom
that's so sweet.
experience
Yeah, he
just
took
to
her to
like
the
because he loves
mall
her
for
so
a
much.
photo shoot.
Yeah, like a norm, like to have like a normal life and then through like a prom, like he just loves her. I
Wow.
love that.
I'm gonna have to, yeah, that is a great example.
Yeah, he's a walking green flag. So
Yes.
in Benny
He
Blanco, we
was-
trust.
He was written by a woman.
Yeah, I love that. Yes. And ultimately,
was so
everyone
good.
online is giving Selena so much, like, like just heat because of
Yeah.
just like him not being the ideal societal level of attractive, which I just think is so messed up in so many ways. Like, he makes her feel good. He treats her like she's worth something. Like, and Justin Bieber did not. Like, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But I just think like it shouldn't matter what someone looks like. Like, at the end of the day, he cares about her, and like that's really all that matters. And treats her good, treats her like the queen she is. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that was so good. Who would have
Yeah.
thought?
Oh, I could talk about Selena Gomez all day.
That's an example too of like when you go through stuff and only she really knows ultimately like what she went through in her past relationships and stuff, but when you go through stuff you learn what you want and what you don't want and what matters in the end. And I think that their relationship now is a testament to that, where she's like, no, this is what really matters to me and everything else is secondary. So yeah, that was a beautiful example, Hannah.
Being single to like learn about herself and grow, and I would argue that her attachment style changed from that time.
Yeah. Good.
I would argue that. She went to therapy.
I'm sure she did.
Yeah, there's a whole documentary about it. Yeah. It's a good one too. It's a good one.
Oh, that's really good. Interesting. Yeah, I love that. So yeah,
maybe
awesome.
we'll do her documentary next.
Yeah, that would be a great part
I'm
two
kidding.
to this. Great part two to this. Oh, as always, guys, I had such a great time. I'm so glad we talked about this. I think this show, there's so many things that you could like learn about when you look at reality TV, but through a clinical lens, so I thought it was really helpful to have this conversation. So guys, hopefully it was really helpful to hear us talk a little bit about this as therapists. And as always, if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to write them below. And as always, we say, keep reflecting.